Ken Joydry from the Ironworkers. Congratulations, Ken. Thank you very much, Tom. And that money that's raised from the 50-50 draw goes towards our monument maintenance and restoration whenever required. I'd like to welcome to the stage our next speaker, Lisa Béton, who's going to introduce our keynote speaker. And Lisa is the CEO of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, who have generously sponsored our keynote speaker today. And over the past couple of years, Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP, and Canada's building trades unions have begun to work more closely together and advance issues that are of benefit to the oil industry in Canada and also of benefit to our brothers and sisters of the building trades unions. CAP represents the Canadian upstream oil and natural gas industry, and CAP's member companies operate from coast to coast and are responsible for nearly 3/4 of Canada's annual oil and natural gas production and more than 400,000 jobs in nearly all regions of Canada. Since her appointment in 2022, Lisa has overseen the strategic realignment of CAP's priorities and advocacy efforts, reestablishing CAP as a nonpartisan, evidence-based research advocacy organization and authoritative resource on energy industrial policy. Please join me in welcoming Lisa to the stage.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, and thanks so much for the opportunity that I have to speak today. As mentioned, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers is the upstream oil and gas sector. We represent the conventional and unconventional sector, the onshore and the offshore sector from coast to coast. Our members are responsible for developing about 3/4 of all oil and natural gas production here in Canada, and our supply chain stretches across the country, reaching thousands of businesses located in every province and supporting over 400,000 jobs for Canadians. And when you factor in induced employment, that number doubles to 800,000 jobs. That includes the thousands of workers who are represented by the Canadian Building Trades Union members who are here today. CAP is proud to be here in association with the CBTU. The people in the room and those represented by CBTU are the builders of Canada's major projects and, by extension, the builders of the Canadian economy. But our economy is being challenged. The world is undergoing a rapid and sometimes violent transition in terms of trade, economics, and energy, with global geopolitics changing rapidly. And with that, so are Canada's relationships with long-term trading partners and Canada's reputation in the Western Alliance as a G7 member and NATO partner. And Canada's competitiveness globally is falling far behind on the most meaningful global economic indicators. Over the past 5 years, Canada's per capita GDP has flatlined to less than 1% growth compared to the average growth of the OECD counterparts, which average about 5.6%. Over the past 7 years, Canada ranked 44th out of 47 countries tracked by the OECD, and most worrisome, the OECD is projecting Canada to be the worst performing economy, dead last, out of all 38 advanced countries over the next 40 years, achieving the lowest real GDP per capita growth. So yes, you heard me correctly, the OECD has pegged us as dead last. So how do we solve for this? One of Canada's greatest competitive advantages in the global economy is our energy advantage. Canada is blessed with a world-class resources base. We are the 4th largest oil producer and the 5th largest natural gas producer in the world. Our oil reserves are larger than Russia. But our competitive advantage isn't just about resource wealth. What distinguishes us from some of the larger oil and gas producing nations like Saudi, like Russia, is that Canada produces our resources with some of the highest human rights and environmental standards in the world. We have a unique combination of a commitment to climate change action and investment in clean technology innovation, a stable democratic system of government, and systems in place to ensure the financial benefits from the resources Canadians own are shared across the country, and workers with the talent to produce our resources responsibly. The oil and natural gas industry attracts the exact type of investment that can fix Canada's productivity crisis. The major projects built by this industry and by workers like you are the GDP generators, and they are generators through the life cycle, and they attract billions of dollars in spending on machinery, equipment, innovation, and that enables workers to be more efficient and productive. The jobs created by the industry are high quality and high paying. The average wage within the conventional oil and natural gas sector pays about $47 per hour more than the national average, which means higher standards of living for workers and higher income taxes for governments. And the business fundamentals of the Canadian oil and gas industry are strong. There is a growing market for Canadian oil and natural gas resources. We are at record oil levels of oil production, and with the Trans Mountain expansion set to start, we're set to hit record levels of oil exports. We're only about 1 year away from exporting some of the world's lowest emission liquefied natural gas to international markets, and the industry is one of the largest employers of Indigenous peoples in the country. Making up a significant part of that supply chain are hundreds of Indigenous-owned businesses. For the second year in a row, capital investment, or CapEx, from Canadian oil and natural gas is expected to reach about $40 billion. In addition, the industry spends $70 billion a year in operating expenses. So realizing Canada's energy advantage has the potential to position our country as a leader in lowering global emissions, exporting secure, responsibly produced oil and natural gas to set off higher emitting sources from other countries, as a reliable source of energy security, not just for ourselves, but for our allies, and as an economic powerhouse, investing in the technologies of tomorrow and benefiting all Canadians on the path to get there. So my ask of everyone in the room today is to lend your support to Canada's oil and natural gas industry, learn about the opportunity Canada has to become an energy superpower, and the role we can play in lowering global emissions, providing critical energy supplies to our allies, and creating prosperity for all Canadians. Then share that with your friends, with your colleagues, families, and elected officials. Tell them you want a thriving energy industry in Canada, and working together is the only way we can make sure that Canada unleashes our energy advantage. I now have the immense privilege of introducing one of the country's most remarkable builders, who dedicates much of her life to building a better and stronger Canada. Clara Hughes is an athlete, an advocate, and an author. She is the only athlete in history to have won multiple medals in both the Summer and Winter Olympics. She's a 6-time Olympic medalist. She has represented Canada in both speed skating and cycling. She has served as a flag bearer for Team Canada at the 2010 Vancouver Olympics opening ceremony. And she is the founding spokesperson for Bell Let's Talk, a campaign designed to end the stigma attached to mental illness. And Clara helped jumpstart the conversation on mental health in Canada. Over the course of her distinguished career, Clara has won countless awards and accolades. She was awarded the International Olympic Committee's Sports and Community Trophy. She was honored with a star on Canada's Walk of Fame. She was inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame, and she was named a member of both the Order of Manitoba and as an officer of the Order of Canada. In 2022, she was named an Olympian for life in recognition of her making the world a better place by promoting Olympic values at every stage of life. In her effort to lead a life in motion, she has completed the Triple Crown of long-distance hiking, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Appalachian Trail, and continues to this day to find deep meaning in outdoor activity and adventure pursuits. She shares her powerful story in her best-selling memoir, Open Heart and Open Mind. So before we welcome Clara, let's go back to some Olympic moments on the video.
incomparable Canadian Olympic legend. The race may be done. The story may not be done at all.
Clara Hughes has continued to write that remarkable story. After Clara's unprecedented achievement of winning multiple medals at both the Summer and Winter Olympic Games, she was awarded the medal as an Officer of the Order of Canada.
I really feel like this is just the beginning, and as long as I live, I hope to be able to reach out and share the experiences I've had as an athlete, as a Canadian, traveling this globe and representing my country.
This commitment led her to join Bell's mental health initiative, Let's Talk Day, as a national spokesperson for the cause.
I hope I can stimulate dialogue and conversation about this, and maybe I can give people the courage to talk about it themselves.
Clara's Big Ride, her cross-country bike trip, was a continuation of that effort to reduce the stigma surrounding mental illness.
The dream of a stigma-free Canada is alive. It is achievable. We can do it together. Thank you, Canada.
Please join me in welcoming Clara to the stage.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. I am really, really nervous. And I'm going to tell you why. When I did my little pre-event call with Sean and the crew, I was like, okay, why am I here? I have no skills that are specific to all of you. I skated in circles and I pedaled my bike. Those are my skills. So I'm very, very humbly here today, and I hope I can end this conference in a good way. This conference of teaching, of training, of learning, of connecting. This talk this afternoon, this really fun discussion on mental health and substance use. Isn't it great? Right. So thanks for sticking around. But it is a conversation that is so important. And as I listened this afternoon, I was so humbled to listen to Matt's story and Matt's sharing. And I can only imagine his sharing and how he can make so many people in this industry feel seen, heard, and believed in their own struggles. And it's such a crucial thing to see yourself in the people that are struggling too. It's such an important piece of the puzzle. I feel hopeful by Vicky's findings, the many, many pieces of data and statistics, hopeful that there is some kind of a plan that will be implemented, that will make a difference if every single person can embrace a tiny ounce of what is laid out. And I'm inspired by Sean's leadership, by what he has shown in terms of caring, in terms of action, in terms of conversation and opening up this conversation so that everybody can hear loud and clear that mental health matters, that people are struggling, that if it is not you, if you're not the 1 in 4 Canadian that will go through a major mental health crisis in your lifetime, you are also a part of that 1 in 4 because there's 3 other people connected to the 1. There's 3 other people that have the chance to support the 1 person struggling. And the thing about this struggle is it is not done in a silo. And if it is, chances are the person struggling is not going to come out of the struggle, and they may die. The 3 of us that are not the ones struggling have the chance to allow someone to be seen and heard and believed in their struggle. Listening to Mark's presentation, I'm going, before I return to Vancouver Island, and getting my naloxone kits because I want to be a superhero. I don't want to have to act in this way as a superhero, but I want to know that I have that toolkit in case that opportunity is right in front of me. And it is life and death for someone I may never know. So to have this chance today to be here, yes, I'm really nervous, but the more I spoke with Sean about why he wanted me to come in and why I've been invited, I got kind of excited. And nerves to me as an athlete mean that I care about something, and I have felt in the waiting room up there throughout the afternoon feeling like I'm waiting to go to another race, to another start line, to unleash, I hope, something special. And so today, of course, I'm your Olympian for the afternoon, and I am going to delve into some of that higher and faster, stronger place of the Olympic ideals that guided over half of my life. I am going to share some of that relentless pursuit of excellence that still guides my life. Because when you have the chance to do something special, when you have the chance to connect with other people, that's living. But it's not just sport, and it's not just medals, and it's not just that chance to represent that I want to share, and I hope that I can bring some of those Olympic memories that I hope some of you were cheering me and the teams along the way. I hope we can connect through that. But when I think of the words of your president, Sean McGarvey, when he talks about the foundation of this union being people, the foundation being people, people matter. And without people, you don't exist. So how are all of the people going to be cared for? It's not just talking about performance and statistics and numbers and projections and successes of buildings and bridges, infrastructure being built. It's about being human in this competitive space. It's about seeing people in their struggle and knowing how you can help. I hope that I can share this with you through story, because for me, stories are what connect us. Stories are what connect us at the deepest level as human beings when we can be so very different. They help us find something in common that can bring us and keep us together. And so my story, well, it begins a long time ago. I'm a class of 1972, very proud. That's a great vintage. I don't know if there's any other 1972ers in the room. It began long before that. But where I want to start this story and this sharing, because we don't have all afternoon, and I know this is the end of the conference, and everybody probably wants to get to their flight and get home, I want to start my story at 17 years old. And for me, at that time in my life, I was anything but Olympian. I was a kid from the inner city of Winnipeg doing everything wrong. I was a product of my environment, and my environment was a rough one. I was born into a house that had a lot of dysfunction, and as a kid, I did not know how to make sense of that. And when our family broke up when I was 11 and my big sister was 13, we did what we knew to do, and that was hit the streets. And hit the streets hard. And for me, by the time I was 17 years old, I say I was anything but Olympic because I was smoking a pack a day, I was heavy into drugs and alcohol, and I was no longer going to school. And so as an athlete, you always think Olympians maybe have these leadership skills and show what's possible. I like to think as a delinquent, I also had a lot of leadership skills. I led my friends to the beer vendors, and I was 5'9" at 13 years old, wore a lot of makeup, had big hair, and I could buy beer for my friends. So I was kind of a ringleader of sorts, leading the way to delinquency for others. But that all changed one afternoon. It changed one afternoon when I saw something that changed my life, and I connected to that something. And that something was my first image of the Olympics. They came from my mom's TV in her living room on a frigid February afternoon from Calgary, Alberta, from Treaty 7 territory, from the Winter Olympic Games, and what I came across changed my life. I came across the most boring Winter Olympic sport there is, long track speed skating. I watched these skaters go around the 400-meter oval. It wasn't short track. There's no contact in long track. But as I watched, something connected me to that movement. And that also, I have to admit, these were some of the most beautiful men from all around the world wearing head-to-toe Lycra. How can you not connect to that? Come on, I was 17. But as I watched, and I watched these Herculean-looking men glide around that ice with effortless ease, glide as if It took no effort at all. I watched them, and I felt connected to the rhythm of their stride, of the straightaways, of the corners. And as the athletes stood on the starting lines, I learned of Canada's great champion, the defending Olympic champion, Gaetan Boucher, who I learned was in his last Olympic Games and was apparently all washed up at 27 years old. I quit 2 months shy of 40, so how things have changed. But at that time, you stopped, and you went to school, and you had your family, and you got your job, and you got on with life. And Gaetan had been sick, and he had been injured. And the commentators said he had no chance, but what I witnessed that day was somebody trying to do something so special, not listening to what everyone else said he could not do. Gaetan went off on world record pace. And I thought he was going to win an Olympic gold medal in a sport I had never seen before that afternoon. I remember being at the edge of my seat, cheering for this great champion who had fire in every cell of his body. And then he hit 3/4 of a lap to go and blew up spectacularly and creeped across the finish line in 9th place. And I remember Gaetan going to the infield and putting his head in his hands as if he had failed. And I remember thinking it was the most awesome thing I had ever seen. And I had the audacity and the street sense and the fight to somehow believe that I was going to do that one day. I was going to be Gaetan. I was going to represent. I was going to try to win the Olympic Games. And I did go to that party that weekend. And I did smoke that pack of cigarettes. And it still took me a while to get off of the path of destruction I was on. But slowly, I had the chance to change. Because I had a mom at home that cared, that got me involved, that found a club and a pair of rental skates. And I remember thinking I was such a good skater in ringette and hockey, and I played community sports my whole young life because that's what my friends did. But the athlete I was the kid that played soccer and played goalie because I figured out I didn't have to run. And when I kicked that ball, I could kick it so far. These legs were strong. It was making my mind strong. It was being surrounded by people who were trying to be the best at what they were training to do, and that was speed skating. And so slowly I changed. I went back to school because I made the team to go to Regina, Saskatchewan, which for me, this kid from inner city Winnipeg, was like going to the moon. I had never been outside of provincial boundaries. It was so exciting. I remember being on the bus to Regina and felt like I was going to Los Angeles and Hollywood. I just felt like a superstar, but I had to go back to school because if I wanted the privilege to represent my province, I had to be good at everything, and that included school. I realized that the drugs and alcohol that I did not know at the time, I was using to numb an incredible level and load of pain inside from what Mark very accurately described as early childhood trauma, which so many of us hold and don't know what to do with. Numbing that pain my way was drugs and alcohol, truancy, trouble, and it transformed. I found a new way not to feel, and that was sport. And the thing with sport was when you start winning, people encourage you. People don't look below the surface and see something that may be broken. And sport taught me so many things and shifted the trajectory of my life in a way that I am eternally grateful for because I don't know if I would be alive today without it. But at the same time, I was in a competitive environment that lifted up all the things that could make you good. Starving yourself, overtraining, not resting, beating yourself up because you never felt that you were enough and only training harder to be better than you were, even if it meant harming yourself. Those things were lifted up because you might win another race. And so what really happened in this transformation wasn't this kid that was dabbling in the early days of addiction in her life. What happened is this kid found a new way and a new outlet and a new hit to numb that pain. And that was winning. And I was good. I was fast. And I was successful from day one. First on the ice and then on the bike. First provincially, then nationally, then internationally. And by the time I was 23 years old, I made my first Olympic team. And the problem with this thing that was happening, winning so much, is that people stopped seeing a human being in front of them. And for me, I had a plan inside, because all of this pain that continued to build, because every time I went home to the sickness of my family, my father's struggles with substance use, my sister's deep struggles with mental illness, and my mother's PTSD. I had this belief that if I could win that big thing and have that shiny object to take home, that Olympic medal, that if I won that, I was gonna fix everyone. Because deeply ingrained in that pain was that it was all my fault. Something I still struggle to not believe. I went to my first games, training in Hamilton, Ontario at the time, from 1990 to 1997, training up Sydenham Hill. I know there's some Hamiltonians in the audience, up and down, racing around the world, winning a silver medal at the World Championships, leading into my first Olympic Games, in the very fringe sport of women's bicycle racing. It's not hockey, it's not even speed skating. People would be like, so what else do you do other than riding that bike all the time? And I tell them, I'm trying to win the Olympics riding this bike all the time. And so I went to those games, and I earmarked and bookended Canada's historic medal performance at the time with 2 bronze medals of my own. I got to bring those shiny objects back to Hamilton. I remember walking down the street and someone recognized me, invited me to Tim Hortons, bought me a double-double and some Timbits. I felt like a superstar. People said they would recognize me by my smile when they saw me on the streets. And I had those shiny, heavy medals in my pocket. They'd ask to see them. They'd tell me where and when and how they saw my race and how it made them feel. And then they would tell me that they were proud of me. And I would say thank you. And I would receive it in a place next to my heart, because I couldn't let these words into my heart, because I didn't think I was worthy of words like that. Because after those medals and those performances and those very first games of mine, I did go back home to Winnipeg. And I went home with those medals, and I brought them to my family. I brought them to my elementary school. I brought them to my friends. I shared them. I showed them off, and the problem was home. Everything was the same. My sister seemed to struggle more because I seemed like I was so okay. My dad took me to the bar and showed me off, drank. My mom just smiled. I left that home visit, returned to Hamilton, and spiraled into my first mental health crisis of my lifetime that I'm aware of. I went from Olympic cloud 9 to literally 6 feet under, thinking I was a failure. A failure because I couldn't continue on this path of destruction I was on. A failure because I couldn't find the discipline to not be doing the things that I began doing again. That was drugs, alcohol, self-harm. I couldn't train, I couldn't race. I could no longer do my job. But I still thought it was everything around me. And at this time, in 1996, there was no mental health discussion. And so I did what I knew to do, and that was blame myself. And I looked around and I thought, well, if I can't do this anymore, maybe I just am not strong enough to be an athlete. I'm not strong enough and disciplined enough to train. So I quit my sport. I quit the thing that I loved, and I thought, maybe if I leave this environment, maybe, just maybe, I can be okay. The problem is everywhere I went, there I was. I got really lucky in this time because my workplace cared. I didn't have financial support. There was none of that. But they reached out to me. They gave me lifelines. Come to the training camp. Show up. Be with the team. You're not safe alone. I received this open invitation to continue to be a part of a team, of a collective, of people that I could not talk about my struggles with, but a team of leaders who said that I didn't need to win for them anymore. They just wanted to make sure I was okay. This was a 2-year struggle before I came back to racing. I'm not going to lie. And I also think I lost 2 of the best years of my young athletic life because I grew up in a place where you did not talk about struggle or pain. We are still in a place where we do not talk about struggle or pain enough. We are still in a place where we put performance over person. But at that time, the support I received first from the national team doctor who took me into her office and did not go over the parameters of blood work, of blood pressure, of heart rate, saying that I was good and fit for competition and training. Instead, this doctor sat me down, and for the first time in my life, someone explained to me clinically what mood disorders were, what addiction is. And then she also told me clearly I was not the only athlete sitting in that same chair in her office, receiving that same information, living that same struggle. She also explained to me the many ways that I could get help. Medication, changing my ways of doing what I was doing, and that was running into the same brick wall over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome. She explained to me the many different ways to train for something like sport, and most importantly, the absolute crucial element of rest and recovery. And she told me that I would be back with so much certainty that I almost believed her. That struggle that lasted 2 years, the thing that brought me back was a coach. And this coach is from Quebec, from Montreal, and his name is Eric Van Den Eyne. He's also a trained auto mechanic. He's also the brother of an Olympian who went into his own mental health crisis after the 1976 Montreal Games and did not receive support from that traumatic experience and lives with the outcome. Eric, being an auto mechanic, I don't know if it was the proximity to the Gilles Villeneuve racetrack, but he loved to compare his athletes to vehicles. I was his Formula One car with this aerodynamic body and this huge engine. And Eric would talk about the driver of the car. And he'd say, the driver, Clara, she's not okay. Let's work on her head. Let's work on her heart. And if we can get that person on track, supported, guided in the right way, not just by me, but by so many other people, so many important pieces to this puzzle. And the most important thing that Eric told me is that he was my coach. He could not be my psychologist. He could not be all the other elements of support to put me back in that car and try to win some races. And I'm saying this to all of you as leaders, because often when you talk about mental health, when you talk about struggle, when you talk about substance use, when you talk about crisis, it's a terrifying thing to think about, to be there trying to help someone. What do I do? What do I say? How do I help someone? What if they need more from me than I can give? I don't even want to go there because I just don't know. I'm saying this to you because the most important thing that you can give a person is to allow them to be seen and heard and believed in their struggle. And the next most important thing, which has been a part of this conversation this afternoon, is to know how that person can get help, who you can steer them to so that they can get the professional help that you, as a non-professional, cannot give them. Eric did this for me. He taught me how to listen to my body. He taught me how to walk that first step on my healing path, how to be curious about my mental health, how to be curious about all of the things in the vault inside of me that was causing so much pain that I'm still looking for the key to open at 51 years old. Eric encouraged all of these things, and we went back to another Summer Olympic Games in Sydney 2000. I finished in second last place in the road race because I had the whooping cough, but he convinced me to, first of all, finish what I started, and secondly, not give up on the magic of that day that is possible if I just try. 4 days after that second last place that I'm so damn proud of, I finished in 6th place in the time trial, 13 seconds out of a bronze medal position with the whooping cough deep in my lungs. But most importantly, that experience, learning to walk the healing path in parallel to this pursuit of Olympic excellence, I was beginning to realize that anything was possible. Anything. And so at 27 years old, I decided to go back to the ice. Got my skates. They were old. They were insignificant because the technology had changed. I bought a new pair of skates. My mom sent me my old skin suit from Manitoba. It was turquoise and red and white and too small on me. I didn't know if I had grown or it had shrunk. And I found a new teacher. I moved to Calgary and I started working with Julie Wong, one of the finest technicians at the Olympic Oval. Julie taught me how to skate, but most importantly, Julie was a coach and a person that, as well as Eric, cared more about her athletes' overall whole health than any performance. And she knew that if she could connect us to ourselves, that she could get more out of us than we ever dreamed possible. Julie taught me to skate, and 18 months later, we stepped on the Olympic ice for the first time for me in the winter in Salt Lake City, earning a bronze medal in the 5,000 meters for Canada. Julie brought me to the Torino Olympics, and together we won another silver and gold medal in the team pursuit and in the 5,000 meters. Julie brought me to ultimately the most special Winter Olympics and Olympics of my 6th Olympic lifetime, and that was the home games in Vancouver. And through this whole time, she encouraged me to walk that healing path, to find new and creative ways to heal. I would come to training some days where I was struggling, weeks where I was struggling, months where I was struggling. And Julie would send me home often, saying, "You need rest more than anything right now, and I need you to connect to the psychologist. I need you to connect to this person that you said helped you last year when you were experiencing the same thing." Again, a leader who didn't try to be everything for me, but knew how to direct me to get the help that I needed, to keep my head above water, not just to skate fast, but to be alive. Julie also taught me about mindfulness. She gave me some books. I remember opening one up and thinking I was going to learn how to be in like that Zen position, that like cross-legged thing, you know, with my eyes closed and going, And I'm like, okay, maybe there's something in there. Is it going to make me skate fast? I'll try. I opened up this book and it talked about washing the dishes. And I was like, what is this? And as I read on, I read the most beautiful description of the lowest common denominator of the things that we don't want to do, and that is washing the dishes. That's why we have dishwashers, right? Julie gave me this book, and the explanation was performing this sacred act of feeling the warmth of the water on your hands and the sud of the soap, performing the sacred act of cleaning the dishes that nourished you and your family. And the person that wrote this book shared this act because he said, if you can be present for the things you don't want to do, and if you can be present for the most mundane acts in your day, that's how you practice being fully engaged when it really, really matters, to the things that are most important in your head and in your heart. And so I practice washing my dishes. I practice skating laps, turning left over and over and over again. And as I matured as an athlete and headed to those last Winter Olympic Games, I was going to be 37 years old representing Canada, traveling around to the Netherlands, to Norway, to all these different countries around the world, and people in the hotels were starting to ask me, oh, are you the coach or the massage therapist? I was like, I won the Olympics 4 years ago. What are you talking about? I'm an athlete. But it was really that time, kind of the last season in my athletic life, where I looked a little older than my teammates. I had a lot more experience than those around me. And I had to find ways to connect to the beautiful beginner's mind that I remembered a long, long, long time ago when I sat and watched Gatineau and my dream began. And so I looked for ways to connect to this beginner's mind, leading into the incredible opportunity of an Olympic lifetime for an athlete like myself, and that is competing at home in Vancouver, for Canada, as Canada, and in Canada. And I remember going to a website and finding a little beautiful logo, and it said, For Host First Nations. And I remember I clicked on it. What's this? And what I learned in this territorial lands that I did not know and didn't have a connection to was I learned whose traditional unceded territories these were, the Musqueam, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Leewat nations, who were going to welcome the world to their lands, to their territories, as we all did as well as Canada. I learned of the programs that they had in place, that they were implementing this cultural Olympiad that would unfold right alongside the races that athletes like me participated in. And so I sent them an email wondering if maybe there was some friendship there or something there that I could do, or meet some of the kids, take them skating at the Oval, the beautiful Richmond Olympic Oval that so many skilled tradespeople built, created for me what is this place of worship, this place where dreams are lived and made and magic happens. As I trained for those games and we were literally skating in a construction site, I have to say thank you to everyone in this room, because I have a feeling there might be one person who had a part in the magic that was created at that rink. But the connection I made with the For Host First Nations is the connection that brought me back to the place of possibilities, the place where anything was possible, because they said yes. They said yes. Why don't you come and meet some of the kids, meet some of our community members? And I remember doing belly slides on the ice that I was going to try to defend my Olympic gold medal on only months later, with the kids laughing and playing, and most importantly, learning and remembering and being reminded of what it is to have fun. And as the games drew near, I remember getting really, really nervous. I was asked if I would be Canada's flag bearer. I received a phone call, and I was like, does anybody say no to this? Of course I want to do this. And it was a secret I had to hold for 3 weeks. I couldn't tell anyone except my husband, Peter, my coach, Julie, and my physiologist. Julie and my physiologist, Dr. Dave Smith, and I decided to make the opening ceremony my first race of the games. We had a pre-race plan, an execution of the flag, and then a recovery plan, because my first race was 36 hours later, and we wanted to make sure I was ready to skate like I'd never skated before. And I was so excited going into the press conference, finally, days before the opening ceremony, and it was announced that I was our flag bearer. I remember being so utterly stoked. I remember thinking, I don't even have to skate for this kind of stoke and this kind of satisfaction and happiness and deep, deep honor. I just have to walk around. This is going to be fun. And then I was asked the very hard questions from media around the world, from the Dutch media making fun of our slow ice. They started calling it the Slovel. Nothing to do with the construction, everything to do with the ice makers. They even airlifted Zambonis in to try to fix this ice problem to make it faster. To questions about the cost of the athletes' village and who this housing was really for. To the very, very dire situation on the downtown east side, and why were we spending so much money on something like sport when this is here every day. I remember the last interview I did live via satellite from CBC with Wendy Mesley, national news. I remember staring into the little camera and then hearing her words. And here with us tonight is this drunken teenager from Winnipeg, our flag bearer, Clara Hughes. Because you see, I had started to talk about the things I did as a kid. I was just like, thanks, Wendy. That's me. And inside I was like, what have I gotten myself into? How am I going to skate after this? I don't know what to say. I don't know how to answer these questions. This is all so very real. And as I was flailing on TV, my friends from the Squamish Nation, particularly the Joseph family, saw me sweating bullets. And because the friendship that we had turned to kinship, they invited me back into their fold a few short days of those opening ceremonies, just before. And they said, Clara, I know this is the time that you turn everything inward. You don't want to be around people. You don't want to get sick. Everything is about performance. But they said to me that they had felt the stress and the load and the weight of these games, and preparing for them had been heavier than they could ever imagine. And to make sure that they were ready to welcome the world, to allow this to unfold, to be present for the magic that was going to happen, they offered me what they had offered each other and themselves, and that was ceremony. And with permission from my friends in the Squamish Nation, I just want to share with you what that ceremony was, because it changed my life. It not only affected me in those games on every day and every moment of the games, it affects me to this day as a human being, because the lessons I learned are universal truths. I remember walking into the family home of the Joseph family and feeling the warmth and acceptance and welcoming of each heart that was beating in that space. With me, at their direction, they said, bring the people who are closest to you, because we need them to be strong too. We need them to be there for you as we are too. And we walked into this room of acceptance and sat in the middle of the room, each of us taking turns and being brushed off, opening our hearts and our minds to the possibilities. When it was my turn, I remember sitting in that chair and listening to the elder Dennis Joseph share with me the values of his people. And he shared with me and looked directly in my eyes as an Olympian, as an Olympic champion about to try to defend her title. And he looked at me and said, Clara, I know you want to win. I see that fire in your eyes, but I also see so much pain. One day you're going to realize that there's more to share than just another medal around your neck. One day you're going to realize that we all need to talk about our wounds so much more, so that we don't think we're bleeding out alone in a room with nobody there to help. I remember Dennis Joseph telling me as a competitor, and he was like specific to the Dutch and German skaters because they were my nemesis. And I always wanted to beat them. They were the teams that we did not want to get the better of us as Team Canada. I'm not talking hockey, I'm talking speed skating here. And for me, he looked at me and said, Clara, the only way that you can want speed and success and goodness for yourself is if you want it for everyone else around you, including Claudia Pechstein, who I know you love to beat. He said that to me, and he said in his culture and with his people that you don't only want goodness for yourself. You have to want it from your heart for everyone around you, and only then you can ask for it for you. And then he looked around that room, and he said, look at all these people here. Look at every single one of them, all of us. And then think about this nation from coast to coast to coast, and think of how many people are lifting you up in these moments. You are there skating for us, but you are not alone. Feed on this circle of strength that is here around you, lifting you up, supporting you, willing you forward. And then he said, the best things are never, ever done alone. They are done in community. I remember walking out of that ceremony feeling larger than life, feeling like my head was going to explode, that my heart was going to implode. I was ready to race that very second. But first I had to go to those opening ceremonies. And I remember walking through the tunnel with the Parade of Nations, and we were the last nation because we were, after all, hosting these beautiful games, our games. And I remember getting to the threshold where I was separated from the team, and I had this holster put on, and I'm like, do I hold the flag with one arm or two arms, or do I put it in the holster? Like, nobody trained me and taught me what to do with our beautiful flag. And I remember a very overzealous volunteer to my right saying to me very loudly and sternly, take the flag, and he thrust it into my hands, and I took it. I took the flag, and I looked at the red on white, and then he looked at me, and he's like, don't drag it, don't drop it, don't screw it up, the world is watching. And I was like, holy shit, I'm glad you're not with me before my race, buddy. And I was like, I took a deep breath, as I do every time before I start my races, before that gun goes off, before I get down into my starting position. I take that deep breath and I center myself and I ground myself and I bring myself into the present moment. And as I did that in this moment, I started swaying our flag with my two hands, and I looked out into this faux winter wonderland of BC Place with dish soap bubbles falling from the sky and flashlights blinking. It was 24 degrees and summer outside at the Winter Olympics, but they made some beautiful magic happen in BC Place. And I remember as I swayed our flag and I saw the maple leaf, and I remembered living in Hamilton and in the eastern townships of Quebec on beautiful fall days, and the maple leaves fluttering in their brilliance of red from the trees in that fall season. And it was as if the most beautiful maple leaf was in my hands, in our hearts, in this moment, for our games. And then this volunteer was like, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, 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 the show must go on. And I remember walking and looking around and feeling this energy of this nation, of all of us. And I remember doing this very short, less than 2-minute walk and feeling so very alive and ready. And then I remember getting to the other end, and another very serious volunteer. They must have done some serious volunteer training in these games, because the volunteer grabbed the flag, stuffed it in a box, and told me to go sit in the stands. I still don't know what they did with that flag. I would have loved to keep that flag, you know? But as I sat in the stands, watched the remaining of the closing ceremony, and I just remember feeling so ready, because I realized that first race was done, and now I get to really try. I get to step on that ice. 36 hours later, I did. I remember skating the best 3,000 meters of my life. I went to the infield after. I was sitting in third place, a place I had never been in that shorter distance that just wasn't long enough for me, thinking I might win an Olympic medal in this race. And then I remembered the words, I can only want it for myself if I want it for everyone else, and I cheered my lungs off for my teammate Christina Groves, my training partner and my dear friend to this day. I cheered for her to be as good and great as I dreamed of being myself, and she proceeded to bump me off the podium. And she won Canada's first medal of our games, and we won the best hug of the Olympics because it came from the heart. I remember watching the bobsled team, Kaylee Humphreys, Heather Moyse, these amazing warrior women showing fierceness and strength. I remember watching them and being like, I want to be fierce and I want to be strong like them. I remember watching Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer skate with grace in the ice dance program, watching them and thinking, I want to skate like that with grace and with beauty and with effortless ease. I remember watching John Montgomery, that wild man from Russell, Manitoba, a fellow ginger, doing his walk of fame after winning skeleton gold up in Whistler, grabbing the pitcher of beer and proceeding to chug like any true Canadian would do. And then I remember watching the bravery of Joanie Rochette. The night before my race, my sister on the ice, Joanie Rochette, a figure skater in the short program who had lost her mother, who died of cardiac arrest only days before. All of us on this Olympic team did not know how Joanie was stepping on that ice. All of us, I don't think just on the Olympic team, but across this nation, anybody connected to that performance, I swear we all held our breath just wishing that nothing go wrong for this person who is carrying the load of such loss that was so raw. And I remember watching Joanie, watching the music begin and watching her unfold and fly and flip and dance on that ice in perfection. And then I remember the music ending and her collapsing and crying tears of sorrow and saying she did it for her mom. I remember watching such bravery, and I knew I wanted to be brave too. The next day, I stepped on that ice for my last time. I skated the most beautiful 5,000 meters of my life, and before that race began, before the gun went off, I remember standing on the line, and what I will never forget is not just the opportunity to try, but I will never forget taking that deep breath, and for the first time in my athletic life and my life outside of sport, I had a realization, a knowing, and a belief in every cell of my body that not only was I ready, I was enough. And I knew I was enough because I knew anything that I won on that day and I earned and I brought home wasn't going to change anything. I knew that the steps I had taken on my healing path had allowed me to meet myself, to know myself, and to really believe I was enough. And believe me, I wanted to win again, so I tried to, and I didn't. And it was one of the most beautiful races of my life because it happened through me. I skated the way I dreamed of skating. I skated the way I trained for 10 years, skating in circles over and over and over again to the point of insanity, trying to perfect the technique and hone my physical and emotional and spiritual skills to unleash this beautiful 12 and a half laps. I remember finishing and celebrating as if I had won the Olympics again, and the problem was there were still 12 skaters to go, and I would have looked like a total jerk if I was in 13th place in the end, but I didn't care because I wanted people to see what human excellence was, no matter the outcome. I wanted to connect people to this path that I had traveled. I wanted to connect people to not only the joy, but the struggle as well. And in the end, it ended up being this beautiful piece of heavy metal that I brought to share with you guys today. And I didn't bring it because it made me any different. I brought it because it's beautiful. And I brought it because it represents the most important opportunity that I said yes to in my life. And it was after these games that I learned that one of my sponsors was going to try to make a difference in Canada in terms of the mental health conversation. I asked to be a part of the Let's Talk campaign because I said I think I have something to share. And it wasn't just my story, although my story is the only one that I can share, but it was the path and the struggle that my sister still endures. It was the struggle of my late father's life and the struggle that my mom still lives with. It was the struggle of teammates and friends and community members and so many people who have spoken to me before and since about the struggle that they endure in silence. This opportunity and this medal representing it was the chance to share some of the struggle. And if I can be quite honest, and what I want to leave you with today is it has not been about the sharing. The great lesson and the great gift of this opportunity and saying yes to this has been learning how to listen. Learning how to hold that space in a non-judgmental way, in a way that someone can not only be seen and heard in their truth, but to be believed. To learning to be a witness. To learning to not fix and rescue, not give advice, but simply hold that space for someone who may be sharing their truth for the very first time. I started this off by saying there's the 1 in 4, and I'm the 1 in 4. Many of us in this room are the 1 in 4. And then I talked about the other 3 of us. I'm the 3, and we are all the 3. Every single one of us can take a little something from this learning, from this training, from this discussion, from all of the people that you've heard share today. Every single one of us can take something into our workplace, into our home, into our community, and hopefully into all of these places and make a difference. And be a superhero. How cool is that? You don't have to wear head-to-toe Lycra to be a superhero. And trust me, I don't want to wear head-to-toe Lycra anymore either. We get to have these secret superhero tools in our pockets. We might not even have to pull them out. But imagine what it's like to walk through everything you do, every interaction you have, and to hold those special tools that just might save a life. How cool is that? Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Clara, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.